Hello and welcome to Torque News. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about automatic transmission fluid. It's a widely debated topic in our industry. Everybody has something to say about it. Everybody has an opinion on it, myself included. In the 70s and 80s, it was not really that big a deal. Automatic transmission fluid, though important, was still not very technical. Today, however, with the new automatic transmission designs, 8, 9, and from what I understand, 10 speeds in the pipes, hydraulic fluid is becoming a much more important issue. You have to deal with electromechanics, hydraulics, small orifices where viscosity plays a big role. You have lockup strategies that change. Before, we used to have, in the early 80s, used to have lockups where you'd have a third gear or overdrive, and then a lockup would engage. Today, they're pulsing the lockup torque converter as early as first gear to obtain much better fuel economy. So the strategy is to make the lockup start up a lot sooner. As you can imagine, this is quite a bit of stress on the lockup lining, and of course, the only thing between the lining and it self-destructing is the fluid between it. So it's very important that you use the right fluid. In today's modern transmissions, fluids are designed as you would design a pump, as you would design a gear, a friction line, a torque converter. Anything that you engineer in a transmission, the fluid is part of it. It's also designed as a component. It's not one size fits all anymore. As you can see here, there's just a few fluids that I was able to scrounge up. Every manufacturer has their own idea on what fluid should be and how it should be made. Synthetic, non-synthetic, all kinds of different additives, and of course, like I mentioned earlier, viscosities. So it's very important that you use the right fluid. If you don't use the right fluid, if it works, you'll be very lucky, because many times, especially with the later units, you'll get a shudder in the torque converter lockup, you'll get a slip, you'll have many drivability issues, those two just being a couple that I'm aware of. So it's very important that you use the correct fluid. Many times people have changed torque converters to avoid a torque converter shudder, and they don't realize that they've also changed the fluid to a better fluid or a different fluid, and all of a sudden the problem goes away. They feel it's the torque converter that did it, when in reality it was just changing the fluid, and that's all they had to do. There are also additives. Many additives nowadays that they make from the factory to put in. You got to be careful with those. Some you want to put additives in, some you don't. So you have to make yourself aware of what's the best possible application for your unit. Another issue of concern is contamination in fluid. Contamination in the fluid is a big problem. Nowadays, we're seeing a lot of antifreeze or coolant making its way into the hydraulic system, and this causes many problems. One of them being it actually attacks the glue that bonds the friction material onto the steel. And as you can imagine, in a short time, that friction material will slide right off as if it wasn't even there. Here's a perfect example. I'll show you a photo of it. We received this one back from a customer not too long ago who had a unit that was contaminated with hydraulic fluid, and as you can see, the clutch line completely gone. And it comes off cleanly, as if the glue was never there in the first place. And you can see the friction material is not even burnt. This happened from it being contaminated with glycol. Now, a big problem with glycol contamination today is that you can't always tell that it's contaminated unless you do chemical tests on it. In the early days with early fluids and early glycol, this is more to do with glycol than the transmission fluid. In the early days, when they used just regular glycol, when it got mixed in with the transmission fluid, it would make something that looked like a milkshake, like a cherry milkshake. Nowadays, with the synthetic coolants, it doesn't do that. You wouldn't even know unless you actually test it chemically. We have that in our shop. We have the proper kits so that we can test a unit for glycol contamination. Very important in some cases, trying to track down a problem or see if you can help somebody out with a solution. So that's pretty much the only way you can check it nowadays. So using the proper fluid is very important. Another issue with the automatic transmission fluid that we got to be aware of is overheating. If you burn a transmission fluid or overheat it, it's not like engine oil. You burn this transmission fluid even once, and you've reduced its life to half, sometimes even a quarter of what it was originally, which means that after a short time, your oil is not lubricating your transmission parts anymore. You lose all that lubrication coefficient, and that ends up destroying the unit in very short order. So it's very important that you use the right fluid for that reason as well, because not only will you burn a transmission from being stuck in a snowbank or overheating it from losing a cooler line, using the wrong fluid in a transmission that requires a heavy synthetic fluid will also destroy it very quickly. So these are all things that are very important with fluid, and I understand that today not many people agree with that because some of these fluids are very expensive. If I'm not mistaken, there's a Nissan fluid in the new GTR transmission that, if I'm not mistaken, is $100 a liter. But you have to use it because these units require this specially engineered fluid for them to work properly. So in closing, I recommend to all of you to use the right fluid to prevent not only drivability issues but durability issues. Let's face it, nowadays transmissions are required to handle electromechanics in large amounts, hydraulics, high temperature, and it still has to lubricate. We ask a lot from these fluids, and if you don't use the right one to begin with, you got no chance. So that's my take on automatic transmission fluid. I hope you found it helpful. Thanks for watching.